get to do the stereotypical presentation where I explain what Terraform is. Okay, so what is Terraform? Terraform is an infrastructure provision tool. So it's a tool you use to create infrastructure, okay? And I think a good way to explain this is the way it works is you declare what you want in terms of infrastructure. You give this to Terraform and you let Terraform figure out. Then Terraform will magically create all the resources for you, okay? It's magic. Well, I know that's a simplified version and it's kind of boiling it down, but I think that's actually a good explanation of how it kind of works in a nutshell for kind of those who are new, okay? And the way it typically starts off is when you're kind of learning initially, what you do is you're actually manually provisioning infrastructure. You go through the console or the website and you click around and you create the infrastructure you need. And I think that's actually a great way to learn. I do it myself. How else are you going to really kind of learn it and really connect the dots? So I actually think that's a really great kind of initial step, okay? But eventually what kind of happens is you start repeating yourself over and over and over and over, and then that starts getting old. And then you start going, I wonder if there's a better way to do this. And then you start thinking, wait a minute, I have an idea that nobody else has thought about before. I can automate this, okay? So that's what Terraform is, okay? Terraform is a way to automate that kind of manual process, okay? There's actually only one tool of many tools in the space, and I'll cover the space a little more and kind of give you a little more context. I think it's actually going to be helpful for especially people who are kind of new to the space, okay? But eventually you realize, okay, I can actually use a tool to do this, and then you're going to start using buzzwords like infrastructure as code, okay? So you realize what you can do is you could codify your process of this manual creation process, okay? So you could write down what you want to what you want to be done, okay? And then you give that to Terraform. Essentially, you give them configuration or code, okay? And the benefit of this is it becomes reproducible because it's now written down, okay? And also because it's written down, you can now version control it, right? So you can get committed to Git, you can push up, you could have extra eyes on it, you can have a review, you can have like a whole audit trail kind of history and everything if you're evolving infrastructure and everything, okay? So those are kind of the benefits of it. And in the Terraform war, you do this in a language called HCL. It stands for HashiCorp Configuration Language. HashiCorp is the company that created the language, and I think it's actually interesting to point out that configuration is in the middle of that. So configuration, notice that emphasize configuration, is because what you're doing is you're kind of writing code. There's a language there. There's a language, that's the third word, but it's also configuration. So you're not actually telling exactly how to do it. You're just saying, this is what I want. Okay, it's like decorative. I'll cover this a little bit more in another slide. I'm gonna actually show you some HCL code so you can kind of get a feel for it and everything, okay? And then next one is infrastructure orchestration space. So I thought this would be actually good context, especially if those who are kind of new to this. Okay, in the infrastructure space, there's many tools actually. Terraform is actually only one of many. And you can see these other tools here are actually vendor specific. So there's AWS, Google, and Azure here that I'm kind of showing. There's other tool called Heat also. So there's a non-vendor kind of tools too. But usually what kind of happens is each of these vendors, they try to separate themselves to kind of get you to buy their business. So they will kind of create an orchestration tool and kind of provide it for free, where they could allow you to leverage kind of the best features of that particular cloud vendor, is because they're working directly with engineers that are making the cloud, right? Now, that's kind of like, I guess, the benefit of those kind of tools there too. But the disadvantage is maybe vendor lock-in there. So now, so that's the angle maybe, right? So there's pros and cons of kind of each of these tools. And I think the one you're going to see most of is you're going to see Terraform, you're going to see CloudFormation. I see those more in the space than the other ones, though I've played around with all four of these actually. Okay, and all these tools though, they generally work the same way. You give them basically some configuration or some code or YML, and then you tell the tool, please give me my infrastructure, and then it'll do it for you, okay? But I thought this would be helpful for those who are kind of new in the space. You might see all these other tools like, okay, what are they, right? So this hopefully helps you kind of mentally put them in the same kind of space here, the infrastructure orchestration space, which is a higher level kind of space than what I'm going to talk about next, which is configuration management space. So why am I talking about this? The reason I'm talking about this is because while you're kind of learning about Terraform here, you might actually see all these other tools, but then you might see these tools too, and you're like, oh, okay, what is this about? Okay, so just gonna quickly touch about this. So this is what I'm calling the configuration management space. This is what other people are calling it too, okay? But there are tools in this space called Chef, Ansible, Salt, and Puppet. They all basically focus on configuring a server. So they're really good at doing that job. They're really good at basically getting a server to a well-known state. So essentially, they all do these 3 steps. They install package, pretend it's like Apache web server or something. Then they, number 2, configure the package, like they configure the Apache settings. Okay, and then number 3, they start up as a service, so they ensure that the server is kind of running all the time. Okay, so all these 3 kind of tools kind of have the same kind of process. They pretty much do kind of do the same thing, but notice they kind of focus on one server here. Now you can run the tool, of course, in parallel across servers and stuff like that, so you're configuring a fleet of servers, but really it's kind of about configuring a server. It's not about actually provisioning higher level resources. So if we go back here real quickly, these orchestration tools at the infrastructure kind of side of things, they can not only configure or provision a server, right? They can provision a server, but they can also provision other resources. Let's say like a security group, right, or firewall rule, or let's say like a Route 53 record and connected to the database, connected to the instance there, or even like a CloudFront CDN distribution. So these tools are higher up the stack. They provision full out resources, right? And these tools are typically running on that server to kind of configure basically things on that server. So I just want to kind of point that out just to help people who are kind of new to your space, okay? Okay, so the last slide here, this deck is HCL Decorative versus Procedural. Okay, so basically this language that you're going to be using in order to provision resources with the Terraform, this is what it looks like. You call the keyword resource, then you call the resource type, in this case is AWS instance or AWS security group here, then the identifier or the name, and the convention is, if you don't care about the name, just use this. That's usually the convention for a lot of people who are writing Terraform code here. And then inside that stanza, inside those curly brackets, basically you assign the arguments. So that's what they call arguments. In here you can see the AWS instance. I'm assigning the AMI, so the image ID to use, and then the instance type, so how much money you want to spend, then tags. And then to find out a list of all the arguments that you're allowed to assign for this particular resource, you would just search for like AWS instance Terraform, and then you could find the reference documentation, and it's going to show you all the arguments that you're allowed to basically assign to that resource there. Okay, so so this is kind of what HCL kind of looks like, and I would say I noticed one thing about this that you know, maybe people who are from the programming side or even not so might not notice. There are no commas. Okay, there are commas. I've seen commas in the language before, but I think HashiCorp has a disease where they're allergic to commas or something. It's like you know, Apple and buttons. No, but anyway, I mean, I guess there's some pros and advantages of that, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. But there are commas here and there, but generally speaking, there are none. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, so wanted to emphasize as decorative, not procedural. So what does that mean? That basically means that, let's say when you are provisioning this resource, right? All you do is tell it what you want, and then it's going to create it for you. Now, if I were to remove that AWS instance, right, I will just basically delete the lines of code and then run Terraform apply, which is how you provision with Terraform. And then what's going to happen is Terraform will figure out and delete that instance for you, okay? Because it keeps track of kind of previous history, okay? So that's a little bit different than actually a procedural language. Where procedural language, you will basically write some type of code that says, create me an instance. And then if you delete that line code that created an instance, you still have that instance, even if you rerun your script. You have to actually create another line code that says, delete my instance, right? So this is one of the added values of using kind of these infrastructure orchestration or provisioning tools here. They're usually decorative, and they basically just say, give me do what I want you to do it, and then basically it does it kind of for you, okay? So that's a pretty big key difference. Another way I could explain decorative versus procedure nature here is there's kind of 2 resources here. There's the AWS instance and security group, and if they were actually connected, and we were to tell Terraform to create both of these resources, Terraform would know to first create the security group first, then create the EC2 instance, and then associate the 2, okay? You don't actually have to, again, write the lines of code to connect the 2, right? It's very decorative. It's like configuring a configuration language, right? So going back to, let's say, the Nginx analogy, right? So let's say you have Nginx or Apache config. You might have a configuration, you set like a port open, or you create a rewrite rule, okay? And then you restart the server and it just picks up. But if you delete that rule from configuration and restart the server, it picks up. You don't have to actually explicitly say remove the rule, right? So this is the value add of actually decorative languages in general, right? And People have different feelings about this. Some people love decorative languages. Some people hate it. There are things that decorative languages do better than procedural languages, and kind of vice versa, right? But this is kind of like what you're going to be using and what you're going to be basically working with if you're working with Terraform and everything. So okay, so I explained kind of what Terraform is. Okay, I also kind of give some additional context of the orchestration space and different tools in the space that you might run into. I also kind of explain the difference between the orchestration tooling, infrastructure tooling, versus configuration management tooling, which is kind of lower level in the stack there. Then I also give you kind of a glimpse here of HCL and kind of language, and explain the difference between like its decorative nature versus a procedural nature. Okay, so hopefully that is helpful. But that's basically in a nutshell what Terraform is. Okay, hopefully you found it helpful. Thanks.